Al Rogalla,
Zach Johnson.
what was your first day like as a retired lawyer?
I was shell-shocked. I wasn't used to not getting phone calls. So I went from being on the phone 30 or 40% of the day in the office to no phone calls. No one likes me anymore. That was the biggest adjustment.
Yeah.
It's like when you're in our jobs, everybody thinks you're important and you're not, but everybody thinks you're important and want to talk to you. When you're retired.
Yeah. It's something that I've always dreamed about ever since I started practicing law, which is, what is my last day as a lawyer going to be like? And was there sort of, at the time that you retired, you were the Clearwater County attorney.
Yes, I was.
Did you feel a great sort of burden sort of lifted off your shoulders? And did you have this
total
feeling of freedom, or was it more just like it's any other day except I don't have to go to work?
The responsibility was the weight lifted, but the interaction with people, I miss that,
Right.
So yeah, retirement's not what you think. I thought it would, in my mind, I thought it was going to be something. It turned out to be something totally different.
Yeah.
So what you got to do is just like anything else, I can make a roll with it and learn from it.
Yep. So, you retired, I think, maybe 2 years ago now? Or
2 years ago, yeah.
About 2 years ago?
Starting my third year retirement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Third year of the golden bliss, right? They call it retirement.
Yeah, okay.
So you remember your last day pretty well because it was recent, let's say, relatively speaking.
My last day at a contested hearing. The last day.
What? Without mentioning the matter or anything, what kind of a case was it?
One with Matt.
Yeah. Oh, really? Matt from our office here?
So that was the last. That was the last hearing. I had a contested hearing for 2 hours, and I'm going. I'm retiring at 4:30.
Like a CHIPS or civil commitment or something.
Yeah,
like
something like that. Yeah.
I'll have to mention that to him.
Yeah.
So, all right. So that happened not too long ago. But do you remember your first day as a lawyer?
I remember when I got my first lawyer job. I'm going to tell you how I did it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I graduated in, 1996 from law school.
Okay.
No, 1986 from law school. And back then, there was a glut of lawyers, and I was in Grand Forks. Mm-hmm. There was a glut of lawyers. But
You're not talking about East Grand, you're talking about North Dakota.
Yeah, North Dakota Grand Forks. Because I graduated from UND.
Right.
So, and I love that school. But
Yep.
And there was a lot of lawyers wanting, all the young kids wanting a job in Grand Forks. And so I was competing with a lot of people, and I was, and I went to this one law firm, and I interviewed, and they go, no, we don't want you. But we know this law firm that won't tell anybody they want a lawyer, but you should go apply there. And I didn't know how to, I drove by the office, ooh, there's a, kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And but I didn't know, they weren't asking for a lawyer, so I pretended to be a client. Called him up, made an appointment with the lawyer, and I walked into his office, and I sat down, just like we're talking. And he goes, well, what can I help you with, young man? And I gave him my resume, and he blew up on me. He goes, what are you doing here wasting my time? And I could see he was looking at it, though, when he was yelling at me. And all of a sudden, he got to the Marine Corps part. And he goes, were you in the Marine Corps? I go, well, yeah. So we had a long talk about him in the Army, me in the Marine Corps. Nothing about lawyering. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nothing about school. Nothing about that. And that's how I got my first job. Oh, two military guys talking to each other. And he goes, well, I don't know if we want to hire you, but, And I got paid $19,000 my first year.
Nice.
And they said, you got a expense account, $250 for the whole year.
Wow.
So... and then it went from there.
Note to young people, whenever I hear an example of how one of the rules from How to Win Friends and Influence People comes into play, talk in terms of the other person's interests. And
really?
Look what happened there. He wasn't wanting to give you an interview. He certainly wasn't wanting to give you a job, but then you found out what his interest was. You talked about that, and lo and behold,
Yep.
So you got that. Well, all right. You mentioned that you had been in the Marines. Maybe we should start there.
Oh, yeah.
So you graduated from high school
1976.
in 76 from Lincoln in Thief River Falls.
Yep.
Is that the only high school in Thief River Falls?
Yep. And then there's one in Goodrich, Minnesota, where it's really where I came from, but we were right on the line.
Uh-huh.
So my parents decided to send us to Thief River.
All right. And that's the Prowlers.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Lincoln High School.
The Lincoln Prowlers, okay. You graduated in 1976.
Right.
And did you enlist? How did that happen?
Well, I was a kid on the farm.
Right.
Skinny kid. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what I wanted to do with my future. And I was talking to one of my friends, and he goes, "Well, we just enlisted in the Marine Corps. Maybe you should do that too." And I go, so it was no big plan. I didn't think it through. I had somebody talk me into it. And I knew on the farm, there were 7 kids in our family. I knew the farm could not sustain numerous kids working there. I knew it couldn't. So I figured, well, I better find something to do. And then so I was talked into the Marine Corps, and I went in June, the end of June of 1976, June 30th.
You graduated in May, you go in June.
Yep.
So you say you talked into it by your friend initially,
yep.
and then a recruiter?
Yep, and it was a female recruiter.
Uh-huh. Wow, that must have
known.
been pretty uncommon for that.
I should have known, and I was going to sign up for 3 years, but she talked me into 4.
Okay. Uh-huh. Now, how did she sell you on that?
There's a lot of good-looking girls in California.
Are you serious?
Truthfully, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about the Marine Corps. Honestly, I didn't know anything about the Marine Corps. I didn't know what I was getting myself into.
What did you? I mean, obviously, we've got the 4 main branches of service, right?
Right.
We've got the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, I suppose the Coast Guard, and then the Marines.
Right.
But the Marines has that reputation, the devil dogs. They, first in, last out, the jarheads, right? Tunk's Tavern and all that. So how much of that history or that legacy were you aware of, and why did you pick the Marines as opposed to one of the other branches of service, knowing that it was supposed to be the most intense and hardcore branch of the service? At least it has that reputation.
In retrospect, I would have went into the Air Force.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I was totally ignorant. I just went with what my friend said and listened to the recruiter. And it wasn't until I got there I started realizing what I got myself into.
All right.
But I'm the kind of guy, Zach, and you're lawyer. I like to follow through with what I say and what I do. So I figured, okay, I'll do this because I said I was going to do it.
You made a commitment.
Yep, I made a commitment. That's kind of how I've done my life. I don't say things unless I'm willing to do them. Yeah. And so that's how I took that lesson with me all my life.
As a minor digression, I that's the way I practice too, because a lot of times clients say to me, "Let's write them a letter or threaten to do something," and I always present them with the option of why don't we just do it?
Right.
Well, but certainly if we say we're going to do it, then we're doing it.
Here's what I always would say: like people would come in and want to do a small claims thing. I'd say, send a letter, do this. Yeah. But in there say, if we don't hear from you by X day, we are going to file this small claims form. And then I'd tell them, and don't let that day go by without filing it, or you wordle me nothing.
You lose all credibility.
You'll wordle me nothing. And they would do it. That day, if they didn't get an answer, boom, file the forms.
So, going back to June of 76, was it Pendleton? Okay, all right. Because I know. I mean, there's
Hollywood
Lejeune.
Marine. Hollywood Marine.
Okay, you're right. Because there's Lejeune and then there's Pendleton, right?
Right.
Okay, Lejeune, South Carolina. Hollywood Marine.
Yep.
Okay, so tell us about the process that brought you from Thief River out to Southern California.
First time I was ever on a plane.
Okay.
First time I was ever on a big plane.
Yeah.
First time
Where'd you fly from?
Huh?
Where'd you fly from?
Minneapolis, I think.
Okay.
Or Fargo, I can't remember. First time I'd ever been out of the Minnesota, North Dakota region. Well, we were farm kids. We didn't have that. So, first time I got to know different races.
Yeah.
First for everything. A
Right.
lot of firsts all
Sure.
along the way.
Right.
And then we flew into San Diego, and a green bus picked us up. Like 5 of us from Thief River went in. And we went into the boot camp depot, they call it. And that's where the terror starts. You start that first night by standing on those yellow footprints all night. All night long, we stood there for your turn to get your hair cut. And you ever watch any of the military things, you see it, they walk you in, and there was no, what kind of style do you want?
Full Metal Jacket, I think they show that.
That's exactly, and if you really want to know what boot camp is like,
yeah.
Full Metal Jacket is they don't kill the drill instructors in
no,
real. But Full
Yeah.
Metal Jacket was, I saw a lot of movies about it.
Yeah.
One of the better representations, really what it was like in boot camp. And I watch that movie and I go, oh my,
yeah.
I can't believe
Brings
it's
back nightmares or flashback. Yeah.
And I was, if you want me to keep, I was in, I remember that I was getting yelled at a lot, but all of us were getting yelled at a lot. They try to, you build your
tear you down,
and we're going to kick you on.
Yeah.
You're going to this and that, and you couldn't do anything right, And I don't know why they were doing a technique they had, and I, just like everybody else, I was going, oh boy, they're really yelling at us a lot, and me a lot, and you think it's you, but then I realized they're yelling at everybody.
Yeah.
But you think it's you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. You couldn't march right. You couldn't do anything right. And about 5 weeks or 6 weeks out of the 11, we went to the rifle range, and I was able to shoot really good.
Uh-huh.
And I was 1 out of 11, not an expert, the higher level.
Yeah.
They didn't yell at me anymore.
Really?
I was off the hook.
Yeah.
Clean ride the rest of the way through. Just
So
keep my nose clean.
So, like in Full Metal Jacket, they give them all nicknames like Private Joker, and I mean, as lot, did
Polak Rogalla.
Okay.
Polak Rogalla or Rogalska or other words that we probably shouldn't put in front of your camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of where, my language is vulgar. That's kind of where I learned it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't hold back.
Yeah.
I'm old.
So, no, okay. And this is just you're enlisted, and then you get through the 11 weeks of boot camp.
Yep.
Did your family come out for graduation or anything?
Couldn't afford it.
Couldn't afford it.
No,
Yep.
a lot of families came out. Mine didn't come out. We had graduation, and then I think we got like a 10 or 20-day pass. Went home. Yay, you're a Marine. Yay.
Yeah.
And then I went back, and then I was put into the Fleet Marine Corps Force.
Okay, what's that?
It's like you're assigned your job. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about my job.
Yeah.
So I was in boot camp, and I went on open enrollment, which is kind of dumb, but I didn't know.
Meaning that they could send you anywhere.
Yeah, and you know what the Marine Corps is? 80% infantry. So I figured I was going to be infantry.
Yeah.
But I remember when I went in there, they had this day where you took these tests. So I took this test, and then they called me in and said, you did pretty good on the test. What do you know how to do? And I go, I don't know how to do nothing,
Yeah.
Except I can drive truck and combine.
Uh-huh.
And the guy goes, you can what?
Yeah.
You can drive combine? You can drive truck? Yeah. And he's writing it down. I didn't think anything of it. When we were assigned our MOSs in boot camp, he'd go down the ranks. We'd all stand, like in Full Metal Jacket, you stand in front of your bunks, there'd be big rows.
Yeah. And they even say that it's like infantry, right? There's a scene in
0311.
Yeah.
Which is infantry.
Yeah.
0311, 0311, 0311. They got to me. 0811. And then they just kept going.
Yeah.
0311. Everybody was 0311 except the guys that had the contracts, so they got your cooks or whatever.
Sure.
And everybody goes, what's 0811? What's 0811? What's 0811?
Did you know?
I don't know. I don't even know. And the drill instructor goes, you dumb.
Yeah.
He gets to ride while you have to walk.
Ah.
And I realized after that, they put me in, it was artillery. They put me in artillery because they needed truck drivers. Mm-hmm. So there is some method to their madness.
Right,
some.
right.
So
you're a truck driver hauling around heavy pieces of artillery. What kind of rigs are you driving?
Like a grain truck, kind of like a heavier duty diesel grain truck.
Yeah.
And you pull these cannons behind. It's like, pulling farm equipment behind.
Yeah.
And you pull it and you go out, train, and come back in. And
did you learn how to operate the cannons as well?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Because my primary MOS is 0811. That was our field artillery.
Yeah.
when I drove truck, it was a secondary MOS of 3531. So I had to train on the guns first. So I knew
so everybody's got to know that.
Mm-hmm. Everybody with 11 gets to be proficient on a gun in every job. There's all kinds of little jobs that are on a gun. And I don't know if you see artillery, but that's kind of how it works. If you ever see movies with artillery, you pull the cannon, pull the thing.
It's like every boy's dream to fire the big guns, right? And how did that make you feel when the first time you got to do that?
It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. Yeah. Coming from a farm, doing stuff like that, I thought I kind of.
What are the range of some of these weapons?
The learning curve I had with society alone and all the different people.
Well,
I was so isolated in Goodrich that when I went to California, oh boy. And I became friends with a lot of people, so anyway.
Yeah.
And then, so that's what I did, except for 2 years I was a cop in the military. So I got a third MP. MOS, or another secondary MOS of 5851, which is military police.
Yeah. So you were never an officer in the Marine Corps then?
No, I was enlisted.
Yeah. Okay. So you were in for how many years? 4 years. You did your 4 years. And where were you stationed? They were
Pendleton.
Always at Pendleton the entire time?
Yep. I had a specialty with the trucks. I knew how to inspect them. Mm-hmm. So they waived me from going to Okinawa. Because in the Marine Corps, if you're in for 4, 1 year is overseas.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Except me.
Yeah.
I got to stay at Pendleton the whole 4 years.
Yeah. That's great.
I hated California.
Did you? Yeah.
People didn't like Marines, and I just didn't like California. The people were too crazy for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
like New York.
I was actually born in California, but I never lived there for any significant period of time. I was born up in Northern California, and I've been back a few times since then, both the Southern and Northern California and Central. You know what? There are some things about New York that I do like, and a lot of people, great people there that I miss, especially from my days as when I was a prosecutor at the Manhattan DA's office and all that. But
how long were you a prosecutor at?
I was a prosecutor from let's see here. I joined the office in 2002, I want to say, because I think I just remembered that this is now it's either my 20th or 21st year of practice total.
Okay.
So, and I was there for 4 years. I started out in the appeals bureau. So it's sounded like what you're talking about, because when I got there, I thought most people got put right into the trial bureaus doing misdemeanor cases and everything. But for whatever reason, I don't know what it was, they took me and they said, okay, you are going to go into the appeals bureau. So I was my first, I think, year and a half, I was a line assistant in the appeals bureau, meaning that I wrote appeals, defending. It was mostly respondents' briefs because the people's appeals were usually handled by that. And when I say the people, that's they call every case was the people against Joe Smith or whatever.
And like we're in state of Minnesota versus.
Yeah, but over there it's the people, right? So so I did that, and those are all felonies for the most part. And we had, our boss was Mark Dwyer, who is now a judge, or he's either a judge or a retired judge, but he was one of the most brilliant attorneys I've ever met. And as a matter of fact, his roommate at Yale, I think he was Yale Law School and Yale undergrad, was Samuel Alito. And so when Alito actually got nominated for the Supreme Court, I think he was a Bush appointee, actually. But they were interviewing my boss about him at that time because, the media wants to know who's this judge and all that they're putting in there. So, yeah, I mean, there were a lot. I mean, when I was hired there, I was hired by Robert Morgenthau. His father, he was legendary DA in New York. He was the DA, I think, from 73 all the way up until, it was like probably 2010 or 2011 or something like that. So he held that position for
which is hard to believe in a city like that.
Elected
with
position.
With politics nowadays.
Well, he had such a great reputation.
Right.
And his father had served as a Secretary of the Treasury under Truman. His name was Henry Morgenthau, so I think it was Truman, actually. I'm not exactly sure about that, but I know he was the Secretary of Treasury because there was some U.S. currency that had his signature on it.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and you're in a job like that, you go in and you're meeting all these people who are, just these exceptional attorneys, people from great families, people from great schools, and I was still sort of the kid from Minnesota, even though I had gone to college in
Were you
upstate
nervous?
New York. I was nervous.
I was too.
I was nervous, but I kind of feel like when you go into any situation, if you're there, you kind of have to you kind of have to say, I deserve to be here, or at least convince yourself that,
right.
and say it's not a mistake that I'm here.
Right.
So
right.
I can't go around with the attitude that I don't belong here. It's a self-defeatist attitude.
I know.
So, but, and then I did wind up going over to the trial bureau, I think about a year and a half after that. And then I did that for, I was there from until 06. So I believe that's right. Yeah, 02 to 06. And then I got up to the point where I was prosecuting felonies. But
wow.
I never got on see, over there, too, they have... and this is the way it was back then, but you had to be, probably a felony assistant for about 5 years before they made you a homicide cadet.
Right.
And then you cadetted for a certain amount of time under a senior trial counsel, usually someone who had been there for years and years, going out on all of the homicide calls, because over there too, there's a lot of homicides.
Right.
And they would, if the protocol was something to the effect that here we have a dead body. Of course, there's a chief detective at NYPD that gets involved and everything like that. But one of the first calls then they make is to the DA's office, and then they get a senior trial counsel, or a homicide assistant, they call it. And then the homicide assistant calls the cadet and says, meet me at, 100,
so you actually went to the
25th
sites?
in Amsterdam. Yeah, they would. Yes. I didn't do that personally, but they would go there because they would want to, because see that Morgenthau believed in what they call vertical prosecution. And it's different in different big cities. Cause like in Philadelphia, for instance, where I also interned there when I was in law school, they did a horizontal system where, there'd be a different assistant in the complaint room, and then when the case would go to its next stage at so let's say calendar, just the all the stages of the life cycle of a criminal case between arrest and trial would be in a different part, and then it's just whoever was there that day would be handling it, and then finally when it reached to the point where it was going to go to trial, the file would be handed to let's call him a trial assistant, and then he would take the case and he would try it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so that would be like what they call the horizontal system. But whereas Morgenthau believed in the vertical system for all felonies and for some misdemeanors, and those misdemeanors would be like your sex crimes or your domestic violence cases.
So you'd get the case and you'd work it all the way to
You'd work it, yeah. End. So from soup to nuts, it would be your case, and
that's a good way to do it.
And it's a good way to do it, especially when you're talking about. But it's not as efficient as the horizontal system. It means you to work more, but you get better results.
My problem, to talk about going to crime scenes, I avoided it as a county attorney. Mm-hmm. Because one time I got called, because I was friends with all the cops in Thief River. All the cops, all the deputy sheriffs.
Well, having grown up there, too, right?
They'd call me all the time. I'll come out to the scene. So I go out there, and I was kind of just walking around this trailer house while they're executing a search warrant on, I think it was a serious case.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I saw something. And I realized at that moment, I could have made myself a witness in the case.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So after that, my practice was trust the law enforcement investigators to do the best thing you can. Then when you read the report, if they didn't do something, just tell them, got to go do this.
Yeah. And I think they didn't do that for just any case. They did it for homicides, right. but mainly what they were trying to do with that is if they had a suspect, they wanted the suspect would be interrogated twice. He would be first interrogated by the detective, and if he talked, then the detective would kind of try to lead him down the path to, there's another interview just to make sure that we get your side of the story that you have to do. and then they wanted the attorney to go in and do a second interview, and that would be videotaped.
Nothing better than knowing all the facts going into the interview, is it?
No, and it would be videotaped, and so they'd be Mirandized, and they'd have all that. So you'd have a second statement, but that it was taken from the perspective of an attorney rather than. And usually, I mean, some of these prosecutors are legend. I mean, the guy that they based the Law and Order Sam Waterston's character after was a guy in my trial bureau who I knew very well, and I still know him. His name is Tom Shields, and he was the guy that Sam Waterston followed around to try to learn how to act like a homicide prosecutor when he was making the Law and Order show. So you're talking about somebody who has committed a homicide being interviewed basically either that night or shortly thereafter by a guy like Tom Shields or Kerry O'Connell. The conviction rate was pretty high. Yeah. Well, assuming that they talked.
Right. Yeah. No.
So
good. Interesting.
It is. Yeah. It is interesting. But but one thing though is that they really impressed upon me. What I think is so impressive about guys like you who are, the county attorney in a county is that they made such a huge deal about homicides. And, it was just this, they put it on such a pedestal, like you have to be, just such a top quality attorney and you have to do everything right. You have to,
because you got 10 people second guessing you all the way up through appeal.
Yeah.
I know.
And you can leave no stone unturned.
I know.
And you have to commandeer all these resources to make sure that you've got your don't forget to get the cell tower triangulation, and don't forget to do this, and don't forget to subpoena that, and all this stuff. Whereas like I see that in a case like in a smaller jurisdiction like this one, Hubbard or Clearwater or someplace like that, where a single attorney has to not only handle all of the homicide cases that are going in there, but he has to handle everything else, including all the chips and civil commitments and all the rest of the civil stuff. And it's just sort of like another case,
It gets to be interesting.
And it does. But I mean, of course, then you get some help from the state too.
Right.
But
well, that's for me. When I first started, I was nervous about it and I didn't quite know what to do. And I thought Thief River, well, we don't have to worry. Thief River, they'll never have a homicide.
Yeah.
No, never have a homicide. I don't have to worry.
Yeah.
I swear to God, 2 years in or 3 years in, right away the homicide, bad one.
Yeah.
And I was pulled into it, and I knew nothing.
Yeah.
So at that time, the Attorney General would or would not help you if it wasn't glamorous. They would think twice about helping you.
So that's really all it is. So there's no established like.
Well, back then no. Now it's more. Now I think all the big serious murder cases they got somebody to do it. Back then, you were lucky. It's like the feds. If it wasn't sexy and it didn't have guns and drugs, they wouldn't take it.
Right.
Now the feds are a little bit more lenient. So times change. Anyway.
So you get some outside assistance.
Bill Klump was the one that taught me quite well. Bill Klump taught me. He taught me how to do grand juries. He taught me how to do voir dires.
Yep.
He taught me how to do everything. He one time he told me we were in the middle of a murder trial. And he assigned certain things to me. I was so excited. Oh, I get to be in a murder trial. Ooh, I'm somebody, my practice back then was I'd walk around the courtroom and talk to the person. He goes, sit down and don't leave this desk when you ask your questions ever again.
Really?
I go, what?
That's
and he goes,
true.
you're taking the attention off the witness by you walking around. And he goes, you watch the jurors. They follow you and they're not listening to him. Gotcha. And I go, oh. So then it was like, I had a hard time because you see who I am. I had a hard time sitting at that thinking,
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. I mean, and
just those things you learn from them. So that was really an eye opener for me.
He was with the AG's office.
Yeah, he was with the AG's office. It was a shaken baby case.
That was
you're going to talk about that, but
Hayden case.
But before we do it, let's talk about getting into lawyering.
Yeah. Okay.
How did I get into lawyering?
I
was talked into it by a professor at college. So my life is not a lot of intelligent decisions. My life is basically given by what other people think I should do.
So how'd you get married? No.
Well, at one point I thought my wife proposed to me and I didn't dare say no. And then she goes, well, you better do it the right way. So then, okay. And it worked good. We're still married, so it was good. But I give her a hard time, but she helps me. But yeah, he and I did the shaken baby case. Bill Klump and I did the shaken baby case. But after I got out of the Marine Corps, I didn't know what to do. I was kind of lost because I was so used to that structure that I didn't know what to do. But I found out miraculously, and no intelligence going on, that I did GI Bill. I should have known that going in.
Yeah.
And a buddy of mine told me, he goes, well, you should go to college. A lot of good-looking girls there.
Yeah.
I was still looking for a girlfriend. I didn't have one. I thought, well, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I went to college at Northland and did really crappy.
Yeah.
Until one day I sat down and looked at my second set of grades and I go, I could do better than this.
Right.
I treated it like a job. And I started getting good grades in college because I treated it like a job. And it was constitutional law in undergrad. Remember that class? Constitutional law?
I remember it in law school. I don't think I took it in college.
We had one in undergrad too. And
Marbury versus Madison.
All that stuff. And I remember my papers didn't get the high grades, but he liked when I talked and argued. Because in our constitutional law class, it was interactive. And one day he sat down, you should go to law school. I go, I'm not smart enough to go to law school. I didn't tell him, I'm here looking for, but then that kind of stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, if he says I could do it, I wonder if I could do it. So I applied for law school and I had a bad entrance test, the LSAT. But I had preference points from the military. It got me into UND. That's how I got to law school. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's.
So and then when I went right to law school after you graduated from college.
Right after undergrad, I decided to stay at UND and I enrolled and got in. Yeah. And then I graduated in '88.
Okay.
From law school, and I tell anybody, any kid, I used to teach college at Northland. I tell any kid, if you want to be a lawyer, don't be afraid. Just go do it and apply yourself. Yeah. I told anybody could. I go, if I can do it.
Yeah.
Anybody can do it.
Yeah, that's something that you hear people say too when they're afraid of passing the bar. You say, everybody knows a lawyer who's some kind of an idiot, right? Yeah. And you say, well, look at that guy. He passed the bar. So you telling me that you can't do it?
Yeah. So, that's how I got to be a lawyer, just by happenstance. And I was looking for a girlfriend.
Yeah. Well,
I ended up being a lawyer.
Yeah.
And got a girlfriend.
Imagine how you had to, what all the lengths you had to go through just to find a girlfriend. So,
started in '88 in Grand Forks.
And then you were at a private law firm. That was the job that we talked about at the beginning of this?
Nelson Kalish Molinari. He hired me about a month later.
Okay.
And my job was the criminal prosecution and divorces.
Okay.
I did a lot of divorces.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of criminal prosecution. That's where I did my first jury trial.
So was it for a city or?
City.
Okay.
It was a city. In fact, Dwight Kellish came into my office one day and goes, tomorrow morning is your jury trial on this case. Go ahead.
Yeah, there you go ahead and you try it. Yeah.
I didn't sleep that night.
Because, it's funny, though, how in law school, they don't really teach you how to try a case. They teach you all these grand concepts and everything, but when it comes down to it, you've had an evidence class, but...
Yeah, that don't mean...
Yeah.
I mean, that's not real world.
Right.
That case, the very first case, I went into the jury scared, and they had a big fancy attorney from Grand Forks, and I thought, well, they're going to win. Went in, and it was a party case, a big party, drunken party, and I just said, I knew a lot about parties.
What was the charge?
So I go, this guy got up there, and he goes, I went to the jury, I go, don't let him fool you. You know what they were doing, and totally not even really legal arguments.
Yeah.
Objected to, and the judge goes, just let him go.
Yeah.
Convicted.
Yeah. Hey.
And when that happened, I realized... I think I could do this.
Yeah.
I was later directed. I later had a JNOV, but we won't talk about it.
I mean, that's the thing is like when they say if you go to the casino the first time and you win, that's a bad thing because now you're hooked, right?
And that's how I really got into prosecution. And then with the salary we talked about, I thought I could do better. And I had a friend in Thief River who was the assistant county attorney, Pennington.
Yeah.
He was going to go to the public defender's office. And he said, you should apply. So I did.
Yeah.
And I got the job.
So the guy who was a county attorney, he was going to go to the PD side. That's
Don Ondal. He eventually became a judge, and now he owns his own law office. But he went to the PD side, and I took his job at the prosecutor's office.
It's kind of you usually don't see people going that way. But
no.
I don't know. So, when did you become an assistant county attorney up in Pennington?
1990. So I practiced a year and a half in Grand Forks, and I got good at divorces and okay at prosecution. But 1990, I was thrown into the cage, and that's when I started doing everything. So
okay. And who was the county attorney at that time?
David M. Olin, county attorney. And we had a part-time office, so that means about half the time out of the month I'd spend on criminal prosecution. Half the time of the month I'd be, on divorces.
Okay. All right. So you still had your private practice.
So I kept my private practice going to Thief River, and went that way for quite a few years until the caseload got so high that I looked at him and said, I can't do both.
Yeah.
We need to make it, because there was talk about going full time. We need to do both. And I can't do both. And I said, if we don't go full time, I just tell him, I'm honest with him. I just looked at him, if we don't go full time, I think I'm going to go somewhere else and open up my law office, because I got nothing to lose then.
Yeah.
He went right to the county board and said, we want full time or he's walking.
Yeah.
And so he got full time. I was put on as a full time employee.
Yeah.
And then, you get your benefits.
Were you dealing with mostly criminal when you were doing that up there? And,
yes.
Yeah.
My job, Olin had the prosecution civil side of it, pretty much, and I had the criminal side. Okay. So I did everything.
Yeah.
Everything from speeding tickets to homicides. I mean, all in one office.
So, starting in like 1990.
1990.
Like, when did methamphetamine really start to hit the area?
Well, I don't know exactly when, about 10 years in. All I remember is coming from a farming community and hydrous was being stolen. And that's how I started understanding, well, they got to use anhydrous to make what? Methamphetamine. So then I went to a training on methamphetamine, and it really took off there for a while.
Yeah.
Until they put Sudafed away. You know how they put it behind?
Yeah.
The prosecution of manufacturers. So I basically did a lot of manufacturer cases at first.
Sure.
Manufacturer methamphetamine.
Yeah.
They make it in their tub, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I'm like, one guy had to blow up in his... One guy was stealing anhydrous and hose got away and he burnt him, because that stuff's like really cold. Right. Burnt him, those kind of. But they were all manufactured cases. We did mostly manufactured cases. Lots of manufactured cases. Lots.
When did you start to? I mean, are we talking 2000 or before then, or And
not at first.
What I was going to ask you about is,
I would say mid 90s, late 90s. I started getting on my radar. The manufacturer did.
So there was a point A where there was basically zero meth cases, and then how, like, just in terms of like a percentage or like doubling or tripling or whatever, how much would you say that crime went up as a whole as a result of the introduction of methamphetamine in the area?
I have a hard time correlating between meth and theft or meth and burglary.
Yeah.
I know there's a correlation, but I had a hard time doing that. All I know is that people were being hurt by the drug. That's how I perceived it. And I started realizing that in the mid-90s, and that's when I started taking meth manufacture seriously. And our cases went up really high on the manufacturer until they put the Sudafed behind the counter. Then they dropped way off.
Yeah.
Now they're doing it in Mexico and shipping it from Grafton to Thief River or Minneapolis to Thief River.
Oh, okay.
That's how they pretty much mule it in now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of... Yeah. Methamphetamine was one of the worst ones. Yeah.
Well, and it has an impact not just on the criminal caseload, but also on the CHIPS, the child in need of protection or services cases.
Yeah, we could talk about that all day.
Yeah.
You were just involved in those cases, so I am. Yeah. Here's what it does. Okay, women typically have this maternal instinct to take care of their kids. Nothing's more important than your kids, right? Nothing's more important than your kids. Except for somebody on meth. Meth is more important to their kids. Yeah. So it's got such a strong effect that it takes away the maternal instinct. And that's when I started realizing, oh boy, this stuff is seriously bad.
Right.
So then the correlation with uptick in the manufacture was also a correlation with the uptick in the CHIPS cases.
Yeah.
An uptick in the juvenile cases and an uptick in other crimes that were associated.
Property crimes, violent
to get money to buy meth.
Yeah. I mean, you think it would and it would probably also increase the caseload in other places that you wouldn't necessarily even expect it to, like more family cases,
A lot more family cases.
All kinds of things. So it just basically, it had the effect of just increasing the legal system, by
But yet the infrastructure doesn't get more attorneys, and it doesn't get more cops, and it doesn't get more money.
Yeah.
So we're basically, putting that much more burden on the system too. Think about it.
Yeah.
Because the public doesn't realize the seriousness of the meth like you do as a defense attorney.
Yeah.
And so the county boards typically didn't want to pay more money because they didn't realize how bad it was.
Yeah. Do you see any solution to this problem? I mean, if I was going to ask you this later, but since we're on this subject, I was going to ask you now that if there was any one thing that you could do as a county attorney, but assuming that you've got unlimited power to pass any piece of legislation, be it on the federal, state, or county, or even local level, to combat the impact of methamphetamine, what would it be?
Okay. I personally believe a lot of people that use meth have underlying other issues, personally. And I think let's hammer the meth guy. Simple. We'll go after a meth guy. It's a sexy thing, and it's good for politics, everything. But in reality, you send them to prison. Let's say you send them to prison for manufacture for a year. They come back out. It's still the same. They don't learn anything in prison, but how to be better at making meth.
Right.
I always thought that the states should put more money into mental health diagnoses. I think that when these people hit the system the first time, we try to push them into diagnoses so we can see is there something underlying?
Yeah.
Is there something underlying this use so that we can address that? Because I threw so many people, I put a lot of people in prison, and after the years went on, I started realizing crime is not getting any better.
Yeah, you're not cleaning up.
You can throw people in prison all you want. It's still the same. Yeah. Because we didn't.
It's like whack-a-mole, right?
We didn't. I mean, look at school. They test kids for deafness, right? They don't do diagnostics as a routine.
Yeah.
Why not?
I don't know.
Why not? If they did it at that age, you could see some of their underlying mental health issues. Yeah. Now, I know people say, well, that's because they're chemically dependent. Well, my opinion is that's because there's something else driving the behavior. And you got to get to that. Just throwing jail or throwing money, throwing fines, that just doesn't address the issue.
So taking it even another step deeper, right? So we talk about this as sort of coming into its own in the 1990s and into the 2000s and things like that. Why didn't we have these kinds of problems in earlier generations?
I don't think we had sophisticated labs, sophisticated people.
Yeah.
People are more.
But like you talk about mental health conditions that lead to the addiction.
One of the reasons. One of the reasons.
Yeah. So was it just that we didn't have these mental health conditions before, or was it that we had them and they were not diagnosed, and then just the perfect storm of having methamphetamine available for people to self-medicate? Or
I don't know that answer.
Yeah.
I do know that if we did more of the underlying issues, we looked at more of them. And I don't know why we did. I think people are scared in the old days to talk about mental health stuff. You know what I mean? When I was young, you were told, well, they had a mental breakdown. Well, Zach, what does that mean? Right. I mean, I've done a lot of commitment cases, a lot of mental health work.
Yeah, you never saw a diagnosis
as a county attorney. And that's that. Mental health is good for people. But back then, they're having a nervous breakdown.
A stigma.
They're having a nervous breakdown. Yeah. Now I think to myself, boy, that was a pretty shallow.
It goes all the way back to World War I, actually, when the guys would come back and then they would just
PTSD.
say they were shell shocked.
Yep, shell shocked.
And that
combat fatigue. then finally the VA acknowledged PTSD.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there was even, at that time that if they were shell-shocked, they would be considered to be some sort of a weakness, and then they could be dishonorably discharged or, whatever.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Those poor boys with the psychological damage of the war, and that's what they get for a response from our community?
Yeah.
So, really, think about it. The VA did a good thing.
Right.
Because now, I always then, when that started happening, I started wondering about, we had this fancy drug court. Ooh, drug court. And, a DWI court. Ooh, that's a way to divert criminality.
Yeah.
I always thought there should be a veterans court. Well,
yeah,
there wasn't. But I became the veterans court in my office when I was county attorney. I said, I'm on every veteran case on my desk.
Yeah.
And then if I thought it was PTSD, I'd make them go, because the VA's got great programming for that. But you got to do it. You got to want to do it.
And you bring up a really good point, and it has to do with just the philosophy of being a prosecutor. How much discretion. I mean, there's always a balancing act, right? When you're a prosecutor, when it comes to the question of how much discretion a prosecutor should have, right? So you've got on the one hand, you've got this idea that there has to be consistency amongst, the different people that are
sentencing guidelines kind of thing.
Yeah, sentence, okay.
Standard
deal, guy, first DWI, it's going to be this, there's no negotiation versus, on the other hand, you have to be able to have the freedom to make the right call in the right case and deviate from that. But there's this tension because you've got some people saying, well, Al, he's not fair because, this guy was charged with this and this guy was charged with that. And this guy got a worse sentence than this guy. And, what's the difference and everything?
I tell you, when it happened to me, because I was always a hard charger. You see what kind of guy I am. I was right in your face.
Yeah.
I'd be a prosecutor. You did something wrong. You're going to have a penalty. And then one time, I was prosecuting this case. It was a kid. And the victim's parents came into my office and screamed at me because I wasn't doing enough. So I did more and everything. And I took that and I thought, okay, just be mindful. There's other people involved. Don't. About 6 months later, that family's kid committed a crime. And then they were begging to me to give them. I said, weren't you just in here 2 weeks ago saying I don't do my job and I'm too lenient? And now you're saying be lenient? I started realizing, these cases are case by case. And I started doing more analysis on that. And that's what I ran on. I said, we're going to do this meth prosecution. That was when I ran in Pennington, that was the thing. But I also said, I'm going to look at each case individually. I'm going to look at the people. I'm going to look at the people underneath the case.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, Zach, and you know this, 90% of the people we used to prosecute are drug addicts or got drunks or got into a fight with the girl, whatever. There's only like 2 or 3% of true evil criminals.
Right.
My goal was to make sure I didn't miss them.
Right.
So every case that I came in, I go, what's going on here? And I'd have a meeting. And if they were a true criminal, I would rock and roll.
Yeah. Yep.
If it was a kid with a mental health issue, I would do that.
Yeah.
And it seemed to work because I was elected. I can't remember what year I was elected. It's 2006 or something, and I was ever since then. So
yeah, and I totally agree with your approach, and to me that's the most challenging aspect of being a prosecutor, but it's the most important aspect of it.
It's not popular.
Discretion. Yeah,
it's not popular, especially now.
I wrote down a quote that you said that was helping people can anger people.
Yep. There's always two sides to a case.
Yeah.
And, of course, now with 611A, you have to be mindful of the victim's side of it.
Of course.
But there's always two sides, and people forget that because their car's wrecked, and all you want to do is throw the book at the guy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But my job was public safety.
Yeah.
And I always used to think, well, what's the best solution we can get to protect the public the best we could?
Right.
And it wasn't necessarily always thrown in prison. Sometimes it was. At 3%, I'd go hog wild on them.
And sometimes you got the opposite scenario where you've got a victim who's completely uncooperative, like in a DV case or something like that, and yet you still have to prosecute the offender even without her help. And that is that's the flip side of the coin, right?
It's a lot of stress. It creates a lot of stress, especially for an elected official, because you don't want to piss people off, constituents off, but at the same time, this kid needs help.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to try to explain it's very difficult because they don't see that because, it's mental illness. That's not an excuse.
Yeah.
That's not an excuse.
Well, and I also think that people in the abstract tend to have very black and white views on criminal justice.
Look at our society.
But when it comes right down to it, they, like you said, I think that was such a great example of the family saying, "Hey, let's nail the guy to the wall." Except for when they come to my son, but no, actually, he's a good kid.
We elected you.
Yeah.
They said we elected you. You do help us. Son. I said I can't. He committed a burglary.
Yeah. Right. So it's always very easy to say in the abstract, a person committed a crime, he should go to jail, right?
Correct.
But when it comes right down to it, that's not always the best approach, and that's not always furthering your goals as a prosecutor.
Public safety.
In the big picture, forest versus trees.
Public safety was my number one philosophy as a elected prosecutor.
Yeah.
How we doing? Good? Okay.
So, it's public safety. Let's talk about these murder cases.
All right.
So we've got the one I read about seemed like it was interesting, called Monley, but that one was Scoline, I think you said was the name of the victim.
Chris Scholine and Mr. Monley.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the facts.
Okay.
One day, I was driving home from work, and I saw this kind of this Mohawk guy, and I go, what has thief ever become?
Yeah.
Big, tall guy like that. I thought, oh my God. The next day, I found out he was stabbed to death. And I felt bad because I thought that when I saw him, So anyway, a guy named Monley and Chris Scholine. Monley's got a pregnant girlfriend in Thief River, living in a trailer court.
Yeah.
And Scholine and him are good friends, buddies.
Yeah.
Buddies. Let's go to Pine Lake and party with some girls.
Yeah.
They went to Pine Lake and partied up and drank and smoked or whatever they did there. And, they got home late.
Yeah.
Monley's girlfriend was pissed.
Sure.
Pregnant at 6 months, and she's going, where have you been? None of your business. They got into a big argument in the street. Scholine steps in to try to, because he doesn't want Monley to get in trouble and he doesn't want her to hurt the girl.
Yeah.
He's trying to be a buddy.
Right.
Okay. Steps in and says, don't do that. You're overreacting. Both of you separate. Monley goes in the house, takes 3 knives. He's got a small paring knife, a tall or big knife, and another knife. 3 knives in his hand like this, and he covers it with a towel. And he walks back out to the street where the girlfriend and Chris and Scholine are still talking, kind of calm her down. He walks up, boom, stabs him right in the heart.
Just no
dropped right there.
No warning.
There's a big blood trail like deer hunting. Go right to the car. They drug him to the hospital. The car's full of blood. And that was my first murder trial.
Yeah.
No. Hadeen was my first murder trial. That was my second one.
Yeah.
Eventually, something really cool happened on that case. A defense attorney called me up. Mike Lucas here called me up and he said, I think we got a reason why you had those knives, because they're trying to get away from the murder thing. They're trying to go to manslaughter. You get lesser consequence. Smart move on his part. He goes, in fact, Monley told me that he had the knives because they were going to grill. And he thinks he's left the chicken out. The chicken got left out in the yard, probably still there. And I go, well, maybe that would, I don't know if that excuses. So I called the investigator, get over there. Okay, went over there, and there's a chicken on the ground. And it had been like 3 days in July.
Was it a raw chicken?
Like you get them in the store, not like a Wonder Roast, but a frozen chicken, right? Frozen.
Yeah.
You take them, freeze them at home, and thaw it out and cook it, right?
You're gonna barbecue that? Okay, all right.
He sees it, and he looks funny, and he goes, because it's been, the chicken would have been out there for 2 days in July. So imagine, what it would have been like. Yeah. He looked at it, and it didn't look right, and he looked down, and it was still frozen. So what happened is Monley called his girlfriend, who didn't have enough sense to thaw the chicken out before she put it on the ground. And I went back to the attorney. I said, well, the chicken was frozen. Got anything else? He goes, yeah, there was a big fight and you got cut in the leg. I said, stop. If you don't stop, I won't go from murder. I think I charged him a murder 3. I'll go to grand jury.
Yeah.
And we went right to, okay, we'll take the deal.
Yeah.
We're right to the deal. And Monley started hesitating on the, you know how that is.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
defendants, well, they don't want to admit that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Judge Murphy back then, an Irish guy, went to Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Slammed his book and said, Mr. Rogalla, did you say something about a grand jury? I go, yes, Your Honor, I'm going to go back and I'm going to start getting ready for a grand jury.
Yeah.
He said, everybody out.
Right.
Scared the crap out of Monley. His uncles were there.
Yeah.
And the defense attorney and Monley and his uncles, you could hear them yelling at each other when we all walked out of the courtroom.
Oh.
They were all yelling at each other. And I got back to my office and I go, well, I don't know how to do a grand jury. I better call the attorney general's office.
Yeah.
You know, I got a call 10 minutes later. Get over here. He's ready to plead. Went to plead. That's my first case.
So what do you wind up getting?
20.
Yeah. Yeah.
20 years. I think he's almost out now. I think he's out.
Is he?
Yeah. I remember I still got his fingerprint card.
Yeah. Well, it's like
It was cleaning out, so that's my first one. Hadeen was the worst
Yeah, I was
case
going to
ever
say,
did.
so that one is a little more...
That was a terrible case.
Yeah.
That's one where Bill Klump taught me everything I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
He came and he helped.
And that was a case that involved an infant.
Yeah, and so, guy had a girlfriend and he shook a baby to death, Zach. I mean, first of all, what possesses a person to do that?
Yeah.
And then people were there and here's this dead baby, blood all over, dead baby, and they're all the responders are crying, and oh God, I felt sorry when I heard some of the video and I heard the testimony, and I felt really sorry. And he was smoking a cigarette. Shit happens. That's what we use in our. That's what we use in our presentation.
Was that on the video?
That was on the video, and a lot of the witnesses heard it. So that was our main theme. He doesn't care what happened to the kid. He also sexually assaulted the kid and everything. Try doing everything he could because the kid was screaming because it was time to eat and he didn't want to feed the kid.
Now he falls into that 2 to 3% of the evil criminal.
And thus the call to the Attorney General's office.
Right.
Thus 6 months of my time in the attorney's office, county attorney's office, every day I'd delegate an hour to that case for 6 months.
Yeah.
That's how serious I took it.
Sure.
That's another thing when I was county attorney. Any kind of death case, that's the next level of you better look at it closely. Yeah. And I got to the point where if I had a death, I don't care if I thought it was a criminal or not, I'd go to the grand jury. Because I looked at death cases that next level up to make sure that we were doing it right.
Yeah, and then that way too, you feel more confident because you've got this group of people that are hearing the facts of the case and either agreeing with you or finding some other.
When Bill Klump agreed with the murder first, Bill Klump and I talked about it. I said, God, I think it should be that one right there, murder first.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, then we got to do a grand jury. And I got quiet. And he goes, I'll come and help you do your grand jury.
Yeah.
Because I thought it should be murder
well,
first.
It absolutely
you shake a baby to death.
Yeah. I mean,
you shake a baby to death in Al Rogalla's.
Can you imagine a case worse? I mean,
I had 3 babies.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So, I mean, I right away I became like baby's father, and I was all mad. And, so we
you mean you actually had 3 babies at the time? You had over the years. Yeah. So you understood.
I understood.
Yeah.
That babies can cry.
Right.
And as a parent, you just got to suck it up,
So he'll never get out.
No, So we went to the grand jury. They indicted for murder in the first degree because you can't in Minnesota. You can do all the murders up to murder in the first degree. That's only grand jury.
Yeah, right.
And so we wanted that, and they gave it to us.
And the murder in the first degree,
life without parole.
But as the making it, the garden variety murder, if there is such a thing, would just be the intentional killing of another person.
Right.
So
second degree.
How does it get to be first degree?
You look at the facts and you think to yourself, you see that 3%.
Yeah. But I mean, is it because the victim is a baby, or is it? I mean, how was there the extra element that makes it so that it like a murder for hire, or there has to be special circumstances to elevate it from a second to a first?
You're right.
Yeah.
Some cases are based on what you personally think is wrong.
Yeah.
And so I don't have no fat magic formula there. But I personally thought that was murder in the first. And when the Attorney General agreed, I go, yes!
Absolutely. Yeah.
Then he came and helped me do it.
And that's the kind of case where you look back in your career and you can really say, I made a difference.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, because, yeah.
So, So those are some pretty heavy cases, and then of course there's this other pretty also another sad case that you mentioned that it came up a little bit more recently, but had to do with the Pokemon Go game.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
We had a case in Pennington where a kid was on his phone, okay, and the smartphones, and I'm getting better at it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But a smartphone, you can go on the internet. You got like a computer on your phone, in your pocket.
Yeah.
You're walking with a computer. Oh yay! Well, they put games on them.
Sure.
And I don't know if you heard about this Pokemon Go.
I have, yeah.
But apparently,
I know what it is. It's basically it's tied to a map,
thing.
and then you can see the Pokemon or something on the street, and then you go out and try to touch it.
And or like they'd have a thing, you get it, and you get points.
Yeah,
whatever. Apparently, they become so enthralled with it, they don't pay attention to what's going on. The kid was looking at his phone, walked right into traffic, got killed. Mm-hmm. And some of the cops back then thought the woman should be prosecuted. Mm-hmm. And I didn't
the woman who hit him with the car.
She was coming home for DigiKey.
Yeah.
And she didn't intend to kill the kid. It was an accident.
Right.
But I thought it was an accident. But because it's a death case, and because I heard from the cops that maybe I was wrong, I went to the grand jury.
Yeah.
And that's how we resolved it. The grand jury did not bail on that one. Because they apparently agreed with our analysis that it was an accident.
Yeah. So that's your way. You said they didn't bill on it, meaning they didn't issue a true bill.
Correct.
And so when that happens, for those people who don't know, it means basically that the grand jury dismissed the charges.
Correct.
Right. Yeah.
Correct. So no bail means no charge.
Yep. So, you moved to Clearwater County at some point.
2017.
Okay.
I think I started, I was trying to remember that on the way here. I think it's late in 17.
Okay.
Then I was county attorney for only like 6 months or a year, and somebody decided to run against me in 18.
Yeah.
I'd never been run against before.
Yeah.
I had to run a campaign at 62. I'm going, I got to go ask people to be a prosecutor. I'm going,
You had to become a politician.
Yeah, kind of.
Uh-huh.
I'd been before.
Yeah.
Then I really had to be, and knocked on a lot of doors.
Did you? Yeah. And you got reelected.
I got reelected.
All right. And so you did that, and for 2 or 3 years after you got reelected,
yep.
and then you
retired. I was done.
Yeah. I always, you're the second lawyer I've interviewed, the first one being Trent Wilcox, who I'm sure you've probably dealt with before.
I don't want to ask what he said about me.
He's known more for golfing and snowmobiling than he is for... No, I'm just kidding. Trent's a great lawyer.
You got a good law office.
This
is a good law office.
It is, yeah. We're very fortunate.
I mean, if I was looking for a job, I'd use this interview as a piggyback.
Why don't we just... Let's do that, Al. Let's
your podcast?
Yeah.
Do you need a help?
What are your salary requirements? But I like to go back to some of these quotes from these English lords that had commented on law, because they have very they put a lot of thought into these things, and some of these I'm sure you've heard, yeah,
really smart guys.
You've heard some
writing
of these
smart stuff down,
and yeah, but it's always interesting to see how some of the stuff that was written hundreds of years ago still it's this wisdom kind of survives over the years. So and some of these I'm sure you've heard before, but so here's one that was said by Lord Blackstone. I just get your comment on it. It says, all presumptive evidence of felony should be admitted cautiously, for the law holds it is better that 10 guilty persons escape than that one innocent party suffer.
Okay. Now remember, I'm a prosecutor.
So
I was mindful of that.
Yeah.
And I hated the thought that I prosecute anybody innocent, because I would go after him. I would go after him, and I would, I wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
I had the power of the state, the power of the courts. You did something wrong, I go after you. But I always worried that, God, what if they're innocent?
Yeah.
What if they didn't do it? I had a couple guys, we didn't do it. I go, but your DNA. It's one thing to say you didn't do it, but I mean, really, truly.
Well, a lot of them say they did. Most of them say they didn't.
That's where the Pokemon comes back to. I was worried that the girl driving the car was an innocent. An innocent person injected into a terrible system. So then I do stuff like go to the grand jury or whatever to make sure my thinking was right.
Yeah.
And then if I thought somebody should be prosecuted, I'd ask everybody. First thing I'd ask the cops, who is this person? What's he like?
Yeah.
First thing out of my mouth every time.
Yeah.
To try to decide, well, let's not put the innocent. But it's frustrating because what he says there is keep a lot of evidence out.
Yeah.
Let's not, we don't want to get into that because that's very frustrating for a prosecutor because there are many times I'd have so much evidence, couldn't use it.
Right.
If the jury knew it, they'd convict.
Well, but I do think, though, that it speaks to the quality of our system. I happen to think that we have the best criminal justice system in the world.
What is the England guilty until proven innocent? Isn't that?
Well, no. It's the same as here.
Okay.
I mean, our system is basically mirrored of the English system,
Okay.
but I'm comparing it more to the systems like in like the civil system, where, and I don't have any kind of a masterful understanding of some of these systems, but when I hear about cases where the first thing that happens is, when a defendant gets arrested for a crime or something like that, is the first thing that happens is he gets put into a room and a judge sits him down and says, okay, well, tell me about what happened. It's a little different than over here where we have these constitutional rights.
Yeah.
And I think it's deliberately made more challenging for prosecutors just so that we are sure about our verdicts and that, that we have integrity in our system.
We want confidence in the justice system to make sure that that's that way.
And of course,
for me, it was this. Here's what it was as a prosecutor. Well, I'd have this piece of paper. I sure don't want to give this to the defense attorney. This piece of paper is going to wreck my case.
Yeah.
I don't want to give it to the defense. I want to hide it from the defense attorney. Yeah. And what would I do?
You have to give it to him.
I'd give it to him because I figured this. If I can't prove it with that there, then it shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
So I'd send it off and say, here you go.
Yeah.
Boost your case.
Yeah.
I still want to go.
Yeah.
I still want to prosecute.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have confidence that you have the evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. If you can,
or you shouldn't charge it.
Or you shouldn't charge it in the first place.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
I mean, and that's I think, but that seems obvious, but I don't necessarily think that's the view of every single attorney.
Oh,
you
know why we have sentencing guidelines? The reason we have sentencing guidelines is because prosecutors went off. They were unreasonable, unrealistic. Hey, some people take prosecution or even being a lawyer as gives them power to do stuff that I don't,
Well, that's one thing I've noticed about people in general is that if you you take like, a clerk at and it's any sort of like the DMV or something like that, and if you give them any amount of power over another person, they're going to exercise it.
Correct. Correct.
All right, I'll ask you one more.
That last one was a hard one, though.
That was a hard one.
To hide that piece, to give that piece of paper to the defense attorney to wreck my case, once I got that was I supposed to do that, then I didn't ever worry about it.
It's the right thing to do.
It's first time. At first time you're dealing with the ethics of doing it, I did it anyway.
Well, and then the other thing I always think about when it comes to these types of, if I ever have like ethical issues like that, I say to myself, okay, is it worth it to have a minor or even a major tactical advantage in a case, but yet violate some ethics rule and lose my license over this one case? Or, do I take my lumps here and live to fight another day? And it's always better, I think, to do the right thing, to observe our rules of ethics and to play fair, I suppose, too. But just in terms of self-preservation, if you don't follow these rules, there could be consequences.
Well, and for me as a prosecutor, I mean, you got to realize we had consequences over their life. To get a felony on your record is devastating. People don't understand that, but it's devastating to a lot of things. Can't even get student aid.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. You lose your, oftentimes you'll lose your right to vote. You'll lose. I mean, I know that's maybe not as huge of a deal as it is to other people, but with all the hunting and stuff that goes around here,
no possession of firearms,
gun rights.
What if a guy's a deer hunter?
Yeah. Well, I guess he's got to learn how to use a bow.
Well, that's what I said, man. They weren't happy with that. I said you shouldn't have scared him with a gun. Then it's assault in a second. Can't do that.
Yeah. Okay, here's one from Lord Coke. Success in crime always invites to worse deeds. So, in other words, if a person gets away with something, it usually leads to them doing something worse.
Well, I don't know if I see it quite that way. I believe that criminal histories are important.
Mm-hmm.
So I look at the criminal history and I try. That's where it gets back to, is this one of the 3%? That's where I look at the criminal history and try to decide that.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Because
so you cook 1 ounce of meth. You get away with it selling, make $1,000.
Sure.
Or cook 2 ounces of meth. Get away with it, make $2,000.
Yeah.
You cook 10 ounces of meth, they get, and so, there's some truth to it.
But, it also kind of leads back to sometimes, I don't do a whole lot of criminal defense work anymore. I used to. I mean, I was a prosecutor back in New York. I did much more of it. Now I don't do as much of that. I handle like DWIs and minor things like that. But one thing I know that defense attorneys say, especially when we're talking about the first time they get caught with something, is they say, come on, Al, give my guy a deal. This is the first time he's ever done this. And
I'm sitting with the criminal history.
Well, no, but even with no criminal history. Okay. But the piece of wisdom that I've heard on this before is that it's technically speaking, this isn't the first time he's done this. This is only the first time he's been caught. Yeah. And so you got to think that, like, for every time the person got caught manufacturing meth, there may have been 20 times that he manufactured meth and didn't get caught.
Well, I suppose that really smart guy thought, for me it goes back to why they do it. Why?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
Because that was the only way to even come to some kind of logical public safety solution.
Sure. Sure.
So why did they do
you have to attack the root causes of these things.
Right. But sure. Crime pays, man.
Yeah.
Pays a lot better than prosecutors. Defense attorneys make all the money. There's nothing left for the prosecutor.
So the last thing I want to do with you is try to recruit you to audition for our Northern Light Opera Company, because I heard that you are an actor.
Who told you that?
The newspaper. So first of all, Al, is this true? And then if yes, are you also a singer?
I was sitting at my desk in Thief River about 1991, always trying to figure out a way to be a better prosecutor. Mm-hmm. At that point, I didn't think I was going to be a career prosecutor. I thought, well, eventually I'll need it for defense attorney.
Yeah.
And I was reading this article, and it said, well, if you want to be good and you're nervous about public speaking, go do community theater. It's the cheapest way for you to get a lot of exposure as to what you'll be doing as a prosecutor. So I went and tried out.
Yeah.
And I don't know what play it was, and I went and tried out. And I got a part. I'm going, oh my God, they're going to have me. Then I realized, oh, now I got to get on stage in front of a whole bunch of people. What have I gotten myself in? Just like another,
I love it though. I mean, I just love the attitude. I mean, that's it.
Here's
just
the
do
deal.
It, right?
Here's the deal. My biggest part was, and I did lots of plays, love doing plays. I like the camaraderie.
Yeah.
And honestly, back then, after the play, you'd shake hands with all the audience. Mm-hmm. It's good politics.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
Think about it.
So
King and I. I did the King and I.
You did the King and I. Okay.
I had to sing in it, and I write it. So anyway, I tried out for King and I, thinking of, I didn't mind doing choir parts.
Yeah.
Because then I could...
you blend in.
I blend in. Yeah. I'd always tell them, put a tenor in front of me so I can copy. I mean, that's how I...
Yeah.
King and I, they called me and said, we want you to do King. And I go, I just want a part in the audience. No, we want you to do King. And I go, yeah, I'm really not an actor. I'm doing this to try to learn how to be not comfortable. I'm doing this to be comfortable in front of people, and you want me to be the main guy? How am I not supposed to be terrified by this? You'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine now. And he said, there's only 2 songs you have to sing. I go, what?
Yeah.
She goes, I said, I don't sing in public, and I'm terrified about singing. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll cut 1 song, but we want you to do this other song. Okay, you got to do this other song. Yeah. I go, but I sing off key. Yeah. I'm loud. Yeah. I'm in your face. I'm not your kind of guy. They go, you're the king. You can get away with whatever you want to get away with. You're off key. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So then I spent time memorizing a song, and it went okay.
Yeah.
For years. Plays for years.
So,
plays. Red Lake Falls.
You know, we have down
Deep
here,
River.
we have great productions every summer.
I heard that.
Yeah. And I'm actually on the board of it.
Yeah, you told me.
And I think at one of our last, I can't remember when this came up. It was either, because I interviewed Paul Dove, who's like the founder of it. You should check that out because he talks a lot about it. But that they really need people kind of in your demographic to try to audition for it. So I am going to
We painted a lot of people with gray hair because we couldn't get old by guys that try. Guys don't want to try out for plays. This is,
I'm going to pester you about auditioning in the spring. There's nothing you can do about it unless you block me on your cell phone.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that, so you're okay there.
Okay. Sanford Meisner, the famous acting coach, said the foundation of acting is the reality of doing.
All these smart guys are pulling out today. I wish I understood what. I found it to be a release from the stress.
Yeah.
I realized at that, because after doing prosecution for about 5, 6, 7 years, you start thinking everybody's a criminal. Oh my God, everybody's crazy, everybody's a criminal. When in reality, very few people do it. You just don't. You're exposed to. And I get back, and then I'd go do a play, and I'd realize, wait, that's just because I was exposed to them. Look at all these good people. And then I realized, okay, Al, you're just a cog in a bigger wheel. You know, don't take this stuff so seriously. And that's why I learned a lot from playing.
Final question. What advice do you have for young people such as Caleb?
Well, the first thing I would say is whenever you do a text or an email, have salutations. Mm-hmm. We don't like the plea bargain.
Yeah.
I get that. And it would be, Al, how's your day?
Yeah.
We were really struggling with the plea bargain. Truly, Zach. Yeah. No, nothing. We don't like the plea bargain. That's it. No salutation, no introduction. I don't like that.
Right.
I would like, because I don't respond well to somebody telling me stuff like that, you know? Well, because my problem is most people don't know what goes into decision making on the prosecution. Just boldly say that in an email. I also found out that emails make you very impersonal.
Yeah.
And people get to do things on emails they shouldn't, I think. So that's one thing I'd ask the young people to do. And the next thing I think is just don't be afraid. If you think maybe you want to be a lawyer, try.
Or even a U.S. Marine.
Because if I can do it, both of them, anybody can do it. Just got to be willing to put the time in. We all know law school really didn't teach you how to be a lawyer. It's just that the law firms want to see you're able to put the dedication into being a lawyer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and teach you how to think.
I'd have people apply for assistant county attorney jobs, all these really, really smart people. I wouldn't hire them. I wanted the normal person because really, 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 really smart
they have to
people
relate to the jury.
Really, really, really smart people cannot relate to the jury, and our job is jury trials.
Right. Yeah.
And you can't be afraid of doing them, otherwise you're not a prosecutor, and they're scary. So, you know, that's one thing I tell young people: if you think you might want to do it, try it. And I find that even with my kids, they're kind of hesitant to try something new, and I say, try it. My son just recently moved on a farm. He just recently moved on the farm. He goes, oh, I live in a sale my life. Well, how do you know? I don't know if my living farm will be good. Well, how do you know if you don't try it?
Right.
Because you can always sell it.
Sure.
He bought the farm. Yeah. And now he's got a wonderful place at deer hunt.
Literally,
I get to go there.
Literally, but not figuratively, hopefully, because you know what they say, that saying that they say you bought the farm. that means because you had a life insurance policy on you, and when you passed away, they used the proceeds of the life insurance to literally buy the farm.
Yeah, them lawyers. I hate them. Another thing I would say is just communicate. Be communicative. Talk to people, more interaction, impersonal interaction, less computer. Yeah. I mean, what is that? You know, you're looking at the computer, you do all that.
More interpersonal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. More interpersonal, because if you want to be a good lawyer, you have to be able to, you know. But I think the philosophy goes for any job. You want to be a good manager, you got to be able to communicate. You got to do this. You got to do that. So
and it's a skill.
And finally, for the young kids, before you know it, you'll be old. And don't pass up an opportunity, because you don't know what's going to happen to you in the future. Yeah. And
that's true.
I've had things that happen to me that I would have never dreamt would have happened to me when I was 19. Mm-hmm. And now, and back then, I thought I should have done it differently. And I mean, so for example, we were, my wife and I were deciding, do we want to move to Clearwater County or stay in Pennington? I had a gravy job. But my wife said, you realize that someday you're going to be retired and you're going to want your son to visit you once in a while. And what is he going to have? What is he going to come visit you in Thief River in an old house in the middle? We had an opportunity to buy a lake. He goes, your son will come to the lake. He'll fish with you if you buy a lake.
Yeah.
And so then I realized that, oh, okay, we bought the property. And guess what we did yesterday?
Crappie fishing.
Yesterday, 3 inches of ice,
Uh-huh.
went crappie fishing. My son came from the farm and hung out with me. And it was, so I think about the future.
That was a good guess, wasn't it? No.
Think about the future because before you know it,
Yeah.
you'll be me at 65 going, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm glad we bought the lake because now my son visits me.
Well,
Otherwise, there'd be nothing.
One thing I can say is that I hope to have your energy and zest for life when I'm 65, which isn't that far away. So anyway.
It's a curse and a blessing.
Yeah. Al, it's been great having you here. And, we'll definitely be in touch.
I won't take a singing part unless it's in the choir.
Okay. Well,
I would take a lead acting.
What-
I would take
we-
an acting part,
we-
but not necessarily.
you'll-
I know there's a lot of people in Park Rapids probably want to do it.
Al,
instead of me.
you audition, and then they're going to give you 808B or whatever it was. They're gonna
0811.
0811. They're gonna
0311.
Yeah,
0811.
they're gonna
0311.
They're gonna give you the part that you will fit in for.
Well,
So,
Zach, I
yeah.
got to tell you, it's been fun practicing with you two. We got to do quite a few cases
We did.
together.
It was fun.
You put me straight once in a while.
Oh, I do my best. But Al Rogalla, I hope that we can stay in touch, and we'll see you the next time.
Zach,
All right.
pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
All right.
Bye.